Hello, everyone. My name is Tawana Brown. I'm the Assistant Director in Parent and Family Programs. Today, we have Alicia Brown from Housing. She's going to tell you a little bit about what you should expect as your student enters the university for the fall semester. And so, Alicia, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to turn it over to you.
All right, thanks. I'm so happy to be here with you today and talk about some of the exciting things that are coming for families and new students. So let's see if I can share my screen with you. Let's see. One moment. There we go. And we'll get started from here. All right, I'm moving a little slowly, but here we go. I think many of you probably already know that here at UA, we have a freshman residency requirement. And this has to do with all of the benefits that exist for students when they live on campus. An abundance of resources available to students, a support system easily in place, and proximity to activities, clubs, social events, intramural activities, and so much more. We do know that living on campus as a freshman improves students' persistence, retention, and graduation rates. And every year, about 95% of all freshmen are living on campus. That said, there may be some folks who are watching and thinking about the fact that they live close to campus. They live within 60 miles or so. Their student may be planning to live at home and commute. So I do want you to be aware that if you think you may fall into this situation, the exemption request deadline is July 15th. And there's an online request form through Students My Housing portal that they can submit. And it's generally about 2 weeks or so before a student will hear regarding their exemption request. I'm going to dive into the housing application because that's where I'm getting most of the questions at this time of year. The housing application is online. It opened October 1st. It is still online and it will remain online and available to students honestly through move-in in August. It's found at Students My Housing portal. For students who have already applied and did so from October 1st, anytime through the end of the day on February 1st, those students are going to be selecting their own room during online room selection. And that happens during the first 2 weeks in May. Applying for housing from February 2nd on means that our staff will assign. And again, there's no specific housing deadline. Anyone who's applying at this point will find that the housing application asks them to preference their top 10 residence hall choices. And that's to give some guidance to our staff in making assignments. Unfortunately, we're not able to guarantee a specific building at any point, but we certainly look at preferences that students put on their application. And please be aware, if this is your student, that list of preferences is editable up until the time a student is assigned. So they may have put their choices, then they get admitted to the Honors College, for example, or they begin to rethink some of their choices. They can go back in and edit their list of preferences. Now, in order to apply for housing, you do have to be admitted and you have to pay the freshman enrollment deposit, which is a deposit paid to undergraduate admissions. There is an additional $200 housing deposit that's due with the application. So occasionally this causes a little bit of confusion, but you have paid the $200 freshman enrollment deposit, you access the housing application, and then to complete that, you will pay a refundable $200 housing deposit. Just to be sure that every step of that has been completed, make sure that your student looks in their email. They will get a confirmation letting them know their application is complete. And they want to see that just to be sure they've completed every step and clicked finish at the end. Now, if a student's plans change, we do want to refund your housing deposit if you meet one of two deadlines. So you can go into the My Housing portal again, click on the cancellation. And if it's submitted by May 1st, you'll get a full refund of your prepayment. And if it's submitted anytime between May 2nd and June 1st, you'll get a partial refund. As I mentioned before, room selection will take place in May. It will be the first and second week in May. Login times will be emailed to all students eligible to take part in room selection during the week of March 21st. We anticipate March 24th being the date that those emails go out. So any student who believes they got their housing application in by the end of the day on February 1st and that they're eligible for room selection, they should watch for that email. It will give lots of details about how online room selection works and very specifically when they're eligible to log in. Login times are staggered and they're determined by when the housing application was submitted. So different friends, neighbors, high school classmates will have different times that they have access based on when they submitted their application. The login time is the first time that a student can log in, but we're also well aware that this is a busy time of year. There are athletic events and banquets and all sorts of things that are occupying seniors' time. So if a student is not available during their first time to log in, then anytime room selection is open and available after that time, they can go in. We just remind students you want to go in the first time you can because choices decrease. But please do not panic if you realize you've got, your kid maybe has a baseball game or there's a sports banquet or something else going on during their login time. They will have access after that as long as room selection is open. We will have a room selection guide soon on our website. We also now offer a practice room selection, and that happens around the third week or so in April. So again, if your student is going to take part in room selection in May, I can strongly recommend taking part in the practice room selection when it happens in April. It just gives students a good sense of what they're going to see, what it's like to navigate through the system, what their choices will look like. It is not a full room selection. They won't see every single option that will be there when they do the real thing, but it gives a really good sense of what it is to navigate through the system. So I strongly recommend it. And students should watch for email information about that coming, again, late in March or early April. I do like to let students know and their families that whether you participate in online room selection in May or you're assigned by our staff, we're never able to guarantee a specific building or even a specific room type. Certainly, earlier participation in room selection increases your chances of finding what you want, but there's no way to know for sure what will be available at any point in the process. So I strongly recommend that students have more than one option in mind. It's great to have really thought through your top choice and know where you most hope to be, but have some backup choices too. There are lots of living situations, lots of buildings where students can be very happy, very successful. And so it's great to have thought that through ahead of time. So you don't get into room selection, miss seeing your top choice, and then not know the best thing to choose as a second choice. Also, another thing for students to keep in mind and their families prior to room selection is that once you have gone in and you have picked during this process, that is your student's assignment. Students cannot continue to go back in during room selection, move themselves around, look at other options. Once they have chosen, that's their assignment. So they want to be very careful before they click finish that they have found the space they wanted. If they're pulling in a roommate, that they have discussed it with their roommate and they know where they want to be, because that will be their assignment. Now, as I mentioned before, for students who apply for housing anywhere from February 2nd on, right up through now and into the summer, then our staff will make their assignment. And we begin that process in late May and continue through the summer as long as applications continue to come in. We ask students to put their top 10 residence hall choices. And as I mentioned, this is an editable list. So I wouldn't worry too much about the order that you put your building choices in as you complete your application. If you do a little bit more research, or you rethink it, or you talk to a potential roommate, you can go back in and edit your list. There are several factors that impact when a student gets assigned. And we get this question a lot through the late spring and into the summer. When should a family expect their student to be assigned? Application date is a leading factor. That's generally the most important factor that determines how early or a little bit later a student might get their housing assignment. But some other things that impact it are gender. Occasionally, we're assigning males or females a little bit faster than other students. Certainly, any participation in a living learning community is going to impact when someone gets assigned, and having a roommate certainly will. A roommate who is earlier in the process, who submitted a housing application earlier, is going to pull up their roommate earlier into the process. So those are the main things that are going to affect when a student will get their housing assignment. And again, just to keep in mind, as much as we hope to follow the preferences we receive and a high preference if possible, there are just so many factors that go into where space is available that we're never able to actually guarantee any particular residence hall assignment. As you do some research on housing options, I can strongly recommend that you do a deep dive into the housing website, where you'll find a page devoted specifically to each building with very detailed information. The furniture found in the room, the floor plan, closest dining options, closest Crimson Ride bus stop, all of those things. But in general, this is a quick overview on housing options for students. We have everything from a traditional building where a student will almost assuredly share a room with someone else, and there'll be some sort of community bathroom shared by residents on that hallway. And that's always going to be your least expensive housing option. Tends to also be, I'm told by students, the location where students have the greatest sense of community, and they're most likely to meet and get to know and hang out with other residents of the building. In suite style buildings, students find a little bit more space and privacy. Our most common type of suite is a 4-bedroom suite, where 4 individual students have their own bedrooms, 2 students share a bathroom, and the residents of the suite share a living room and kitchenette. That's going to be a more expensive option because students do have more space to themselves. A kind of hybrid option that is our most recent residence hall construction is a double occupancy room with a private bathroom. This is what you'll find in New Tutwiler, currently under construction and opening this August. And it's also what you find in John England Hall, which opened in fall of 2018, double rooms with their own bathroom. So it's something of a middle ground in terms of space and privacy and cost as well. Cost is certainly a factor that I recommend every student and family think about very seriously as you're looking at your options. Right now on the housing website, you'll find our proposed rates for the upcoming year, and those will be finalized in June. Again, I can strongly recommend that you consider more than one room type, since you're just not sure what will be available at the time you select or when you're assigned. And you may find, if you're still looking for a roommate, that you and a potential roommate have different ideas about where you want to live or what you can afford. So it's great to have different options in mind. Easier to find a compatible roommate if you're flexible in terms of where you might live. I'll mention briefly too our living learning communities, but definitely be aware if this is something that intrigues you, check them out quickly because deadlines come in the spring and are fast approaching. Briefly, a living learning community means that you live in a particular location where those rooms or that building or that wing or hall is tied to an academic program or a college or a major. They likely have their own separate applications, their own deadlines, Some have faculty in residence, which is a cool way to get to know faculty. And it may mean that students are taking a course during one semester or the entire year. Again, these are all described on the housing website with a link to the application, and deadlines do come in the spring. So some of them may have passed or are probably quickly approaching. We also have an option known as themed housing, and that's where students with common interests can live together. The largest and most common is honors housing, located in Ridgecrest North, South, and West. And there you don't have a separate application or a particular course, but if you're admitted to the Honors College, then that would be an option for you. Right now, students are in the midst of searching for roommates, many of them. Do be aware that you don't have to search for a roommate. It's an option, but if you choose not to, you will almost assuredly have a roommate or suite mates who either are assigned by HRC, or you may select a space during room selection and another student will select another space. So not confirming a roommate doesn't mean you won't have one. It means that you will go potluck, as people say. I know many students who have had fantastic roommate relationships with someone that they met at move-in. They didn't actually choose. They were random roommates, as they say, and ended up having a great relationship. And I know students who put a lot of effort into finding the perfect roommate, and sometimes it is a great relationship, and sometimes it's not perfect. So it really is up to you how you want to go about the process of having a roommate. I do think the most important thing for any student, and I know that parents will want to emphasize this to their students and talk about it a lot, is going in and being considerate and communicating with the roommate. Those are probably the most important factors, not whether you agree on every topic or you share the same point of view on different things, but it's that you are thoughtful and considerate and you communicate well. But if your student is wanting to at least explore the idea of finding their roommate, they have up until April 27th to do so. And once students have completed a housing application, they'll get a welcome email and access to My College Roomie. That comes to all students within 24 hours of submitting their housing application. Incoming freshmen are only able to see other incoming freshmen and to form a roommate group with other incoming freshmen. So your student would be looking at other students who at least have that in common. They are fellow incoming first-year students. And freshmen can select one roommate only. As I mentioned, I think it's really important to communicate honestly through the whole process from the very beginning, and definitely talk about things that may affect where you can and want to live. Your family's budget should certainly be something that your student talks about with a potential roommate, the type of building they'd like to live in, and where they're eligible to live. I mentioned honors housing before. That is a very large community, but it is shared by students being in the honors college. So if one student is in honors college and a potential roommate is not, they absolutely can be roommates, but they need to think about somewhere other than honors housing as a location to live. We get a lot of questions at this time of year from students and their parents when there's a group of 4 hoping to get together and live together in a suite. That is certainly possible to do, but there's no guarantee that it can happen. It's a bit of a challenge. Because incoming first-year students can select one roommate only, then a group of 4 has to think very carefully about how the roommates pair up and be realistic about what their chances are of finding an empty suite. To make this happen, it really means that someone in each of 2 roommate pairs has to be pretty early in the room selection process. And if this is true, they have a very decent chance of finding an empty suite. We talk through this process in a little bit more detail on our website. So if this is something that might affect your student, they're hopeful of getting a group of 4 together, definitely check that out. so that they can have some realistic assumptions about whether they may get a foursome together or should be thinking most importantly about a twosome. Now, move-in will be coming up sooner than I can believe, and probably sooner than parents can as well. In June, typically about the second week or so in June, students will be able to select their own move-in day and time. And this, like so many other things, is done through a student's My Housing portal. Please be aware that students do have to have a housing assignment in order to pick their time, because certain times will be associated specifically with a building or a floor or where that student is living. So just to be aware that if your student has not yet received a housing assignment at that point, they're not going to be able to pick a move-in time. We have begun to add move-in dates to our website. Just recently, we've begun to confirm this schedule. So definitely check out the housing website. You'll find a lot of very helpful move-in information, I think, including some dates which have recently been added. Early move-in is available for students taking part in special activities that begin before the start of classes. So big ones are sorority recruitment and $1 Million Band. Move-in dates for those activities will be August 3rd through 5th. There are also a lot of honor students who take part in Honors Action, which is a great community service week, and move-in for that will be August 5th. It is still to be determined move-in dates for some other important activities, and that includes Bridge, Biology Boot Camp, Camp 1831, and orientation. So if your student is taking part in one of those activities, and by orientation, I mean later orientation right before the start of classes, then they should watch for move-in dates to come. Regular freshman move-in will be August 12th through 14th. There's move-in assistance and coordination during those dates in all buildings except Bryce Lawn and Highlands, which are areas with much less traffic and much easier access to the buildings. Students can also move in on the 15th and 16th, which will be the Monday and Tuesday right before classes begin on August 17th. But do be aware, it will not be a formal process then. But if that affects your family because of your summer schedule or plans, then a student could certainly move in there. Again, please check our website because we'll continue to update dates and a lot more useful information as we get a little bit later into the spring. So students will select their own move-in time. They'll have a number of options. And if they are already signed up for an early activity, then they will be guided to those specific dates and times. We always recommend that families make their travel plans after they actually know their move-in time, because as you can see, there is some variability among dates and times. We have lots of suggestions about things to bring and leave at home. There aren't a lot of things we don't allow, but there are some, particularly things that would be a fire hazard, certain appliances, candles, and we definitely have some suggestions of helpful things to have. I always recommend that roommates communicate ahead of time, even if you aren't folks that chose each other, but once you know who your roommate will be, reach out. There may be some things you're willing to share so that you don't end up with multiple items when you really only need one for your room or your suite. And definitely think about purchasing items after move-in. I am also a parent of college students, and I fully understand that desire to plan everything, have it bought and packed and labeled and arranged, or at least that's how my daughter was and how we were. But the result is I have some things back in my house that my daughter never used because once we got to her room, there wasn't space, it didn't fit, she didn't actually need them. And I do in those cases wish that I had waited. And that's one of the things I recommend to parents and to students. For certain things, wait until you get into the room, take a look at your space, decide if you really need it. Some things sound cool and helpful, and are not actually helpful when you're living on campus. So if you possibly can, wait until you've arrived and then decide if you really need something. And then maybe you can purchase it in Tuscaloosa, or you and your roommate could buy it together. Here's all of our contact information. The website is really a wealth of resources, and I want to encourage people to utilize it for questions that they have. Even if you don't find some information now, especially about move-in, we'll continue to update it as we solidify some details. If you don't find information that you want, please email or call us. We love to talk to parents and students and families, and really want to help as much as possible and share any information that we can. We are also on social media, like everybody these days. We use it to remind families about upcoming details and deadlines. We share a lot of move-in information throughout the summer. And so if you are on social media, you may find that we are helpful to like and follow as well. So I'll leave this for a moment just to be sure that people have the contact information that they want and need, and know how to reach out to us when they have questions.
Thank you, Alicia. While that is up, I had one follow-up question. I know this isn't really about move-in, but just so parents and family members can kind of plan. So I know there are a few times throughout the academic year where students are required to leave the residence halls and return home. Can you kind of touch on those dates just so they can kind of be prepared for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is information that's on each building's page on the website. So if this is going to be crucial to you, please check it out. Most residence halls will close over winter break and spring break. They do not close for Thanksgiving. And this fall, the entire week of Thanksgiving, there will be no classes. That brings fall break and Thanksgiving break together. So all residence halls will remain open for the Thanksgiving break, but the majority will close for winter and spring break, with a small number that remain open over those two break periods. So if you think this will impact your student, you live internationally, or you live on the West Coast, or somewhere where your student may not travel home, you anticipate your student working over break, especially spring break, since that's a shorter one, definitely check out the buildings your student is thinking about, because for the ones that close, your student will need to go home or find a friend to stay with or make some other arrangements. So thanks for raising that, because that is an important issue that sometimes families don't think about until they actually arrive on campus.
Thank you, Alicia. So we'll go ahead and wrap up from here. Thank you all for taking the time to spend with us to review this webinar. As Alicia said, she shared the contact information. And so if you have any questions, please reach out to Housing. If there's anything that we can do in parent and family programs, please visit our website as well. And also, I would encourage you to go back and view our past webinars that we've done for the UA 26. There's some great and valuable information there. But thank you so much. And also tune into our next UA 26 webinar, which will be with Bam Adani. So thank you so much, and roll Tide.
Thanks, Tawana.
You're welcome.